So these congresswomen, their comments are helping to fuel the rise of a dangerous, militant hard left. But that's okay, because we're going to win this election like nobody's ever seen before.
Welcome to the Journal Editorial Report. I'm Paul Gigot. That was President Trump Wednesday at a rally in Greenville, North Carolina, doubling down on his attacks on 4 freshman congresswomen for what he calls their anti-American political views. The night took an ugly turn when some in the crowd chanted "Send her back" in reference to Minnesota Representative Ilhan Omar, echoing the president's tweet from earlier in the week. The president on Thursday expressed regret about that chant, saying he disagreed with it. But is his feud with the 4 Democratic congresswomen setting the tone for his 2020 re-election campaign? Let's ask Wall Street Journal columnist Karl Rove, who served as senior advisor to President George W. Bush. So, Karl, welcome. You wrote this week for us that you thought that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and I assume some of these other women in her squad, are hurting Democrats and helping the Republicans. How so?
Well, they are so big a presence in social media and in the media generally that their left-wing views are getting as sort of an outsized attention. And so when Ocasio-Cortez puts out a draft of the Green New Deal that talks about cow flatulence and unspecified measures to restrict people from getting on planes to go take their vacations and a transformation of our entire society, it gets a lot of attention. And similarly, their views on things like Israel and the war on terror. I mean, just the first week of July, AOC called for the abolition of the Department of Homeland Security.
Okay,
so those people with box cutters can go get on planes.
So those views beginning to define the Democratic Party in the eyes of many swing voters. But Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, seems to get this because she's been criticizing them and trying to, I think, reduce their public, if not their public profile, at least their influence in Washington. But then you get the President of the United States interjecting himself into that debate, and with his comments on they should go back, has he undermined some of that benefit for Republicans?
He did, and with his tweet, and then it got carried to an even bigger level in his rally with people starting to chant "Send her back, send her back." I can't improve on the arguments that were laid out in this excellent Friday editorial in the Wall Street Journal on that issue. Yeah, but I think the president understood that. That's why he said in the cabinet meeting on Thursday, basically distanced himself from it. And I hope everybody heard what he had to say. The more the focus is on their ideas and their views and their values, and the less it is on them personally, the better off the president is in making the argument.
And I mean, I think that I'm hearing privately from a lot of Republicans, before in particular the president's expression of regret, but even afterwards, that they're really anxious about the Republican Party being maybe defined in the eyes of a lot of voters as anti-immigrant and creating their own group of deplorables with this kind of rhetoric.
Yeah, look, who are the key voters in the 2020 presidential election? Each side has its own base,
right?
But the election is ultimately going to be decided by people who are weakly linked to either party. In 2016, enough of those people voted for Donald Trump for him to win the election in the Electoral College. In 2018, a lot of them shifted their votes to Democrats for Congress, which is why Nancy Pelosi is Speaker of the House. So they're going to be won not by things that sort of create a sense that Donald Trump is uncomfortable with diversity, that he's uncomfortable with women, that he's uncomfortable with immigrants, but they're going to be won over by saying these people have values and views. These Democrat leaders are advocating things that are bad for our country. And the more he keeps it on the substance, the better off he is. Look, Nancy Pelosi, you talked about earlier. Yeah, she's fighting a two-front war. She understands that the Democrats are being simply overwhelmed. Whatever they're doing in the House of Representatives is being overwhelmed by the talk of impeachment and increasingly the talk by the squad of these sort of left-wing, lunatic, wacky ideas. And so she loved the fact that she got a moment to unify the Democratic Party and go on the offense, condemn the president's rhetoric, and stand her in better stead and her party in better stead with those swing voters. But ultimately, these left-wingers are going to undermine the Democratic Party unless somehow or another they're able to silence them or diminish their impact.
All right, let's for a bit turn to the Democratic presidential race. And Joe Biden seems to have really lost some ground since the first debate. How much trouble is he in, do you think? Can he survive these attacks?
Well, he can survive them, but he's got to get his sea legs underneath him and solidify his support. Think about it. He was at 41 in the Real Clear Politics average shortly after he announced. Now, that was unbelievably high.
Yeah, that was name recognition, a lot of it.
Yeah, name recognition, and he was dominating the news. But about 5-6 weeks later, he was down at 34, which is a respectable number and when you have the field as wide as it is now. But then he's down to about 26, 27 in the Real Clear Politics average, which means that he's lost about, a quarter of his support between when he stabilized and after the first debate. So he's got some trouble there. The interesting thing to me is that that all of this change in the field has not benefited Bernie Sanders. He's declined as well. So we now have essentially 4 plus 1 plus everybody else. The 4 are Biden, Harris, Warren, and Sanders, and then the 1 is Buttigieg, who has a lot of money and has some buzz, but doesn't yet have the poll numbers, and then everybody else is just part of the amorphous minor mob.
Yeah, one of the things that's really struck me, Carl, is that there's been no one else in the sort of moderate lane who's been the party who's been able to emerge as an alternative to Joe Biden. And why do you think that is? Is it just that they're too obscure, too many of them? Or is it that the party is, the energy in the party is really with Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris, and Mayor Pete, and those on the left?
Yeah, look, the energy among activists is clearly with the left. And the interest of the media is clearly with the left and with Pete Buttigieg. Is not so much in Biden. But yet what we know is that Biden, that so-called moderate, the liberal/moderate lane, is the biggest lane inside the Democratic Party.
Right.
What we've got Sanders, Warren, Kamala Harris, and others trying to carve up a slice that's basically, a plurality, not a majority of the Democrats. What's going to be interesting to me in the next debate is Amy Klobuchar, who's going to be in the first night's debate with Warren and Sanders. Is she going to try and display herself as the moderate alternative to them and thereby begin to crowd some of that space in the event Biden begins to fall? But right now, hard to see how somebody in that third tier, 4 plus 1 plus everybody else, she's a part of everybody else. Hard to see how they vaunt themselves up at this point, especially since her fundraising has been rather anemic.
Yeah, good to flag that. That'll be her a real opportunity. Thanks, Carl. Appreciate it.
President Trump was attacking Ilhan Omar, a Somali refugee, as one of the 4 freshman Democrats he's targeted, at a North Carolina rally when some in the crowd broke into an ugly chant, sparking fierce criticism from pundits and, of course, members of the squad.
And obviously and importantly, Omar has a history of launching vicious anti-Semitic screeds.
I think it's the low point of the Trump presidency.
Not just the low point, but the worst, the most depraved, disgusting, and totally odious thing that the president's ever done.
I think the people of North Carolina were I don't think they were saying send her back as much as they're saying these views are repugnant.
We have said this president is racist. We have condemned his racist remarks. I believe he is fascist.
Well, I think the president put millions of Americans in danger last night. His rhetoric is endangering lots of people.
The president took questions from reporters the next day and distanced himself from the chant.
I would say that I was not happy with it. I disagree with it. But again, I didn't say that they did, but I disagree with it.
Molly, the president then offered this tweet about the sick partnership involving the media. If we can put it up, it's amazing how the fake news media became crazed over the chant "send her back," but is totally calm and accepting of the most vile and disgusting statements made by the 3 radical left congresswomen. Should the president be blaming the media for covering this chant?
You shouldn't blame them for covering it, but certainly the way in which they covered was completely overwrought and ridiculous. And also the way that they would slice. Like, it was great that you even had a little bit of what he was saying before the chant begins. He was talking about the extreme views of Ilhan Omar, which includes sympathy for terrorists and anti-Semitism. It is not to say that this is the appropriate response to it, but you have to have these things explained in context. Also, though, I think the media just pretend to be outraged more than they are. It reminds me so much of how they reacted to the lock her up chants, which rather than trying to understand people's frustration with how Hillary Clinton wasn't held accountable for mishandling classified information, they just said it was the worst point in the campaign and it was awful and horrible.
Right.
And it'd be better to just try and understand what's going on.
Well, I just want to make one quick point, which is this isn't just a bunch of libs. I mean, for example, Piers Morgan has been very supportive of the president, interviewed him recently in Britain, called the chant and Trump's handling of it vile, shameful, racist. He blamed Trump. But let me put up on the screen how some news organizations, this one's from CNN, reacted to the president saying he started speaking quickly in order to move past the chant.
Why didn't you ask them to stop saying that?
Well, number one, I think I did. I started speaking very quickly.
The media counter-argument is that the president didn't do anything in real time, though he did attempt to distance himself. And then the next day he was asked about the North Carolina rally-goers, and he said they were patriots.
Like you said, this happened a week ago, Sunday. He said it, and then it's not like the media that night said, oh my God, he let 13 seconds go by. It was not until the next day when Trump said the clip that we watched that they then showed the clock, the timer, and said that is a lie. So it's not that the media was looking to jump on him for time. It's that they were calling him out on a blatant lie. He did not try to speed up his speech. He did not try to stop it. He sat there and he enjoyed it.
Beverly, I generally don't blame politicians for what some crazy people in the crowd might say. I do think the president might have discouraged this earlier, given the vile nature of that chant.
I'll give both of them a little credit. 13 seconds is a long time, but Donald Trump, he also led up to this with his recent comments. But when you're in a group of people in this crowd, it can be hard to know what to do when you're taken off guard by what people say. Also, if you could look at the difference between him and how he handled the lock her up chants, completely different body language. He didn't chime in. So I think this is a little bit of a stretch for the media.
All right, and on that note, Beverly Hallberg, Molly Hemingway, Philippe Reines, thanks so much for joining us.